Oh, you're going to love this one. Guess what Tucker Carlson's latest excuse for his hatred of Jews is? Have a watch.
So when Moses goes up a second time to Mount Sinai and says to God, please kill me, these people are too annoying, I can't deal with it. Is that anti-Semitism?
Yes, that's right. His excuse for being anti-Semitic is Moses and the Torah itself. Absolutely brilliant. Well, the problem with all of this, Tucker, what you just said, is basically every single part of your sentence. Let's just quote what you said there. Moses goes up Mount Sinai and says, please kill me, these people are too annoying. Is that anti-Semitism? Well, first of all, you seem to have got two of the stories in the Torah confused together. The moment where Moses says, God, please, can you take away my life? That is not what happens at Mount Sinai. He says something else at Mount Sinai, and we'll clarify what those two things are. So that already tells you that Tucker Carlson is not exactly on top of his biblical knowledge. So let's now talk about this moment, because I'm grateful to Tucker for allowing us to delve into what actually happens in this fascinating story. The moment that he seems to be referring to comes much later. It's in the wilderness, it's in the middle of a chaotic, exhausted human situation, not at the height of revelation, not in some serene spiritual encounter. It's a leader surrounded by pressure, noise, and responsibility, trying to hold together an entire people. Now, Moses does not say, these people are annoying. That is a distortion. What he actually says is, I cannot carry this people alone. That's a very different sentence. He's not diagnosing the people, he's describing his own limit. And he uses an extraordinary image. He says, am I supposed to carry them like a nurse carrying a suckling child? Now here's what's fascinating. God never told him to do that. Moses simply intuits it. Why? Because that's the kind of leader Moses is. He understands instinctively that leadership here doesn't just mean giving orders or managing logistics. It means total emotional responsibility. It means care, patience, endurance, love. And that's exactly why he's breaking. Not because he hates the people, the complete opposite. Because he feels responsible for them at a level that is almost unbearable. So when he says, please kill me, what he's really saying is, I care too much to do this halfway, and I cannot do this alone. In fact, it's saying the opposite of what Tucker's saying. It's showing how much he cared about the people. And how does God respond? Not by saying, you're right, these people are the problem, but instead by saying, you need help. And he appoints 70 elders. That tells you everything. The Torah itself interprets the situation as a leadership overload problem, not a these people are inherently unbearable problem. Now let's go deeper, because if you want to understand Moses' relationship to the people, you don't look at one moment of exhaustion, you look at the defining moment of his leadership. Because there is another thing that happened at Mount Sinai, which maybe Tucker's getting confused with that and this moment. And this is also another very telling moment that totally undermines what Tucker's saying. Because after the golden calf, when the people have done something genuinely catastrophic, and understanding the golden calf story is a talk in and of itself, which, as is the case with every single story in the Torah, there's always a much deeper layer to understanding it all. So what happens is, this time, Moses is at the top of the mountain. And Moses says to God, forgive them. Forgive the people. And he gives a whole bunch of reasons why God should forgive the people. And he says, and if you don't forgive them, erase me from your book. Think about that. That's not frustration or annoyance or distance from the Jews. It's total identification with them. He's saying, if they go down, I go down with them. And it's one of the most radical statements of solidarity in religion, literature. Amazing to think that he's saying that to God himself. He has no idea what would happen if God says, okay, fine, you can go down with them too. It's the opposite of what religion tells us to do, which is all about getting to heaven, protecting yourself spiritually. No, Moses shows the opposite of that. He says, if they are going to go down, I'll go down with them. That includes even in the next world. He was prepared to give up everything because of his love and empathy and standing with the Jewish people. Amazing moment. And we actually really learn from this that actually in many ways this was God just testing Moses. Because there's an idea that he was correcting Noah, who when told that God was going to destroy the world, he said, okay, what do you want me to do? But here, Moses, just like Abraham, when he's told about Sodom, he protests, which is what God really wants to hear. In fact, it's fascinating that when Moses says to God, erase me from your book, the words he uses are, mecheni na misifrecha. Misifrecha means from your book. Mecheni na, erase me, misifrecha, from your book. But I had a really fascinating idea that you can read misifrecha in the Hebrew. You can change the voweling to read misefer chaf, which means erase me from sefer, from book chaf. Chaf is the Hebrew letter, and its numerical value is 20. Remove me from book 20. It turns out that there's the Torah is split into sections that we read throughout the year. And the 20th section, the 20th Parsha, is called Parsha Tetzaveh. And in that Parsha, Moses' name is not mentioned once. From the point of Moses' introduction into the Torah narrative in Exodus, he's mentioned in every single Torah reading, but not in Parsha Tetzaveh, which is all about Aaron and the high priest. And there's a fascinating idea here that the power of the righteous people, of Sadiqim, are so powerful that God has to enact their words in some way, even when he said such a thing there. Fascinating. So you have to ask, is this a man who thinks these people are annoying, or is this a man whose entire identity is bound up with them? And actually, it's what God wanted to see, by the way, because when his leader on earth stands with God's people, he doesn't see that as a problem. He sees that as just the kind of leader that he wants. And it's consistent from the beginning. Moses grows up in the palace, but despite that, he could have lived a completely different life. But no, he goes out, he sees the suffering of the Jewish slaves, and he can't tolerate it. He intervenes, he risks everything. Why? Because he can't detach himself from their pain. That's who he is. So when he later breaks under pressure, you have to understand it's the breaking point of love, not the expression of contempt. Now, what about the people themselves? Yes, the Torah calls them stiff-necked. They complain, they push, they question. But here's the crucial point. The Torah does not present that as a racial trait. It presents it as part of a relationship. These are not passive subjects. They're not easily satisfied. They don't just accept reality because they've seen miracles. They argue, they resist, they test. You can read that superficially as difficult, or you can read it more deeply as a people that refuses to settle for something shallow. They're not looking for spectacle. They're looking for something real. And real relationships are not frictionless. Anyone who has ever been in a serious relationship knows this. The closer the relationship, the more intense the friction can be. Not because one side is annoying, but because the stakes are high. The Torah is describing a covenant, not a fan club. In fact, it's this very stubbornness of the Jews that Moses says to God as part of his argument for God not to destroy them. He said, forgive them, for they are a stiff-necked people. Why would you say they're a stiff-necked people if you're trying to get their forgiveness? It's almost like saying, yeah, they're stiff-necked and they'll upset you again. It's because what Moses is actually saying is, these are a people who want something deep. And once they're in, and once you've gone through the friction, the tests and the back and forth and the challenges of building this relationship, once they're in it, they will stubbornly stick to it. And haven't the Jews stubbornly stuck to their covenant with God throughout history, despite all the greatest tests and challenges? And here's the irony. The same text that gets weaponized here is actually doing the opposite of what Tucker's claim suggests. Most ancient texts glorify their heroes and sanitize their people. The Torah doesn't. It shows a leader who breaks, a people who struggle, a relationship under tension. Why? Because it's telling the truth about human beings. Take any group of human beings, freed from trauma, thrown into uncertainty, living in a harsh environment, dependent on daily survival. They will complain. That's not just a Jewish trait, by the way, that's a human trait. So to take that moment and say, this proves Jews are annoying, is like saying a stressed family arguing proves something about their ethnicity. It's absurd. And more than that, it completely misses the moral of the story. Because the Torah's answer to this crisis is not fix the people. It's support the leader, share the burden. That's a sophisticated insight into leadership. Even the greatest leader cannot carry everything alone. Now let me flip the question. If Moses really thought the people were just annoying, why doesn't he walk away? Why doesn't he say, fine, pick someone else? Instead, at every critical moment, he does the opposite. He defends them. He pleads for them. He ties his fate to theirs. He even breaks the tablets, according to the tradition, not out of rage, but to protect them from the full consequences of their actions. The Midrash, the ancient Torah commentary, gives a striking parable. It says, imagine a king sends a marriage contract to his bride. Before she receives it, she's unfaithful, and the king's agent tears up the contract. Why? So that she cannot be judged as a fully married woman who betrayed the covenant. That's what Moses was doing. He saw that the people had sinned, and so he destroys the tablets. Why? So that the covenant is not yet fully binding in its most severe sense. In other words, he is willing to break the Torah to save the people. And that tells you something absolutely fundamental about the Torah's worldview. The people are not a means to an end. The people come first. There is no Torah without the Jewish people. There's no covenant without a people who live it. Which means the Jewish people are not a vehicle for something else. They are the end of God's plan. And you see that principle echoed elsewhere. In the story of the book of Esther, Esther tells the people to fast even though it overlaps with Passover, Pesach, and keeping the Passover commandments like eating matzah, having the Seder meal. Think about that. Passover is one of the most foundational commandments, and yet, in a moment of existential danger, the preservation of the people overrides even that. Because again, without the people, there is no Pesach. Without the people, there is no Torah. And God likes to see Moses doing this, standing up for God's children, ultimately, God's people. A parent would love to see one of their children standing up for their fellow children. So when Moses breaks the tablets, he's not rejecting the Torah, he's fulfilling its deepest principle, that the covenant exists for the sake of a living people. And once you understand that, the whole framing collapses. Because this is not a story about a leader fed up with annoying people. It's a story about a leader who will go to any length, even shattering the most sacred object he has ever received, to protect them. Everything about Moses points in one direction: relentless advocacy for his people. So what we're actually seeing in that moment in the wilderness is not a leader fed up with annoying people. It's a leader who loves so deeply that the weight of that love becomes almost too much to bear. And that's a very different story. So is the line anti-Semitic? The line itself, in its original form, is not. It's a moment of vulnerability, leadership strain, and emotional honesty. But the way it's being framed, stripped of context, misquoted, relocated to Sinai, and turned into a statement about Jews being annoying, is not an interpretation, it's projection. And it tells you far more about the person making the claim than about Moses or the Torah or the people it describes. Because the actual story is not about annoying people, it's about something much more powerful. What it means to care so much about others that you're willing to break for them and still refuse to abandon them. I'm not against Judaism, I'm just against Zionism.
It's not Jewish, it's Zionism.
Yeah. Judaism and Zionism are completely separate.
Judaism is a faith, Israel is a state.
You can be Jewish without being a Zionist.
Zionism and Judaism is totally diametrically opposed.
I'm sure you've heard this before, from protesters, from politicians, from even well-meaning people trying to navigate the Israel-Palestine debate. But I'm here to tell you that this separation is complete nonsense. It's a comfortable lie. The kind of lie that sounds intelligent but collapses the moment you actually open this book, the Torah, the Bible, and study Judaism on its own terms. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to tackle this myth head on. We'll actually look inside the Torah and see how in the very first book, Genesis, there's no mention of law or religion. It's all centered on the promise of a specific land to a specific nation. We'll trace how Judaism, not modern politics, but Judaism itself, is structured around one obsessive, relentless, undeniable claim: the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. We'll reveal why the building of a nation in the land of Israel is an indispensable part of the project of Judaism. Why Judaism is not a religion, it's the divine project of a nation in a land. We'll discover how the Torah preemptively answered the colonization accusation that wouldn't fully materialize for another 3,000 years. We'll explore why, if the land is so central, Jews had to spend thousands of years in global exile. We'll unpack what Zionism actually means, and how anti-Zionism doesn't just contradict Israeli policy, it contradicts the fundamental architecture of Judaism itself. For some people, this is going to be uncomfortable viewing, but by the end, we'll prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Judaism and Zionism are inseparable. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.